Hi and welcome to the Geek Legion of Doom. This is a B-movie review. I'll be having a look at the 1986 film Eliminators. So Eliminators is a far better film than it deserves to be, I have to say. This is one of those B-movie hidden gems that I absolutely love and adore. Yes, it's quite a cheap film and it does have some issues, but I love it nonetheless. So the Eliminators is really almost a superhero sort of team film in a lot of ways, I would say. It really focuses on what they call a mandroid, which is a character who is was a crash-landed pilot. This kind of crazed scientist sort of finds and basically experiments on, and he's kind of made him into this sort of cyborg, sort of robot type man who has really no memory of his previous life, save for a couple of flashes here and there. And the idea that why he's built him is that this bloke is kind of like, you know, your kind of like supervillain, evil genius type character, and what he's doing is trying to make a time machine and wants ultimately to go back and sort of take over the world. And he's sort of sending the mandroid in as a sort of as a test to see if it's actually working. And we see him go back to Roman times sort of early on in the film and manages to sort of pick up a Centurion shield as proof. Now, when he gets this sort of proof, ultimately he's decided that the actual experiment and the sort of time machine is working. So he decides that he wants to sort of ultimately get rid of the mandroid, and he tells his assistant, who's this sort of Japanese chap, a Japanese scientist, to destroy the mandroid after this. But he's kind of developed a bit of a bond with the mandroid, and he doesn't really want to, so ultimately tries to help him get free. But he's killed in the process. So the mandroid is now kind of disobeying his programming, which is kind of causing him some issues, and sort of goes sort of escapes and manages to try and track down some help. His first port of call is a female scientist who is one of the people to originate this technology that's kind of part of what he is. And you know, she Abbott Reed is the bad guy, and she sort of thinks he's been long dead, and she finds out obviously he's using his technology for sort of nefarious means, and agrees to help the mandroid. And she's sort of developed this kind of this little flying robot called Spot, which actually looks like those toys that you used to be able to get and sort of fly around the floor in the 80s. Anyway, so they go off to sort of try and go back to this sort of like swampland sort of hideout to try and sort of confront Reed and find out what the actual you know, to get back this technology and what have you. But on the way they need a guide, and they go into this seedy sort of like backwater town to try and find these this guide, and they meet this kind of like Han Solo-esque rogue character called Fontaine, Harry Fontana, and he's got a great introduction, and he's kind of this like Weasley sort of you know, he's just like Han Solo. He's this kind of rogue, bit of a pirate, and again he's there and joins the team. Now, on the subject of him, I think a lot of these films try and emulate this sort of like the Star Wars formula, and they try and have these Han Solo characters, but not a lot of them work. But in this instance, I would say he actually does work. He's quite a fun character, and he's got loads of charm. He's not quite as rough and tumble as I would say Han Solo and Indiana Jones and that sort of thing, but he certainly does have that sort of that charm. And I really like his character, and he does seem you know, a huge chancer, but he's great fun to watch. They have a couple of encounters with some locals. They head towards this compound, and then they meet the final member of their team, who is the son of the Japanese scientist that originally helped the mandroid, and he's this kind of ninja. Now, out of all the characters, I'd say he's definitely the sort of most underdeveloped. He doesn't really come into it until after the halfway part of the film. So his character is really the least developed out of all the sort of heroes. But it's an interesting, you know, it's an interesting mix of characters, because and it is what I mean by a superhero team, but it does have you know, a very diverse group of people that do seem to come together, you know, in a fairly sort of organic way, you know, as much as B-movie goes. On the way they sort of encounter sort of cavemen that have been brought back as a sort of as a byproduct of this sort of time travel, and ultimately have this final encounter with Reed, who basically wants to go back to Roman times and use the technology to take over the past, and ultimately then essentially wipe out the future. So there you have the plot in a bit of an extended nutshell. But it's a really fun film, and okay, the budget can't quite live up to the expectations of this film. You know, you do see some of these sort of the visual effects, particularly like the lasers and stuff, kind of look a little bit sort of standing out as being a bit poorly produced. They're not quite as good as your sort of your you know, your big budget Hollywood films. But the actual characters, I think, are the main thing here, and they're really characters that you sort of buy into, and that's really good for a big movie, I think, because a lot of these films, I think that it kind of skips over the sort of characterization. You don't really like the characters almost, and they're just kind of cardboard cut out cliches. But in this film, you do buy into the characters, and there's so much going on. There's so much that happens. You know, the Mandroid, you know, you kind of think, is there kind of a little bit of a relationship building with him and the sort of female scientist, or is there a kind of relationship building with the female scientist and this Fontaine guy? But it's neither of them are kind of really sort of, you're not hit over the head with it. It's kind of just, it just gives it a taste, and I really like it. And it's such a fun film to watch if you can, you know, if you can kind of get over the fact that it obviously is dated because it was made in 1986, and some of the effects, even for then, were probably relatively cheap. And it does go into sort of some sort of cliches. The bad guy, Abbott Reeves, is your sort of very stereotypical kind of cackling bad guy, and he's kind of, you know, he still is quite fun to watch. He's sort of, you know, he has these sort of monologues that he sort of spews out and things like that. And he's got this sort of like bumbling sort of bad guy, you know, henchmen that are kind of, again, are rather cliche. But there's some quite good set pieces considering the budget. I really like this film. I think it's, you know, I still enjoy it watching it today. It's one of my favourite films of the sort of the mid-80s, you know, and I'm a big fan of B-movies, so I have seen a good few of these. So if you haven't seen this, I would actually check it out. If you don't mind films from the 80s, you can do a lot worse than this film. This is one of the better ones. So, you know, this is one film that I'd actually like to see as a remake, I have to say. You probably never will, but it's kind of been forgotten about. I'm going to give this film a 7.5 out of 10. I really liked it. I suggest you go and watch it if you haven't seen it already. Leave me a comment, and I look forward to seeing you next time. See you later.